Okay, hello. Welcome to our chat. Today we have myself, Maia, Valerie, Mikaela, and our special guest, Catherine. So today we're going to be talking to Catherine about some of her experiences in college and deciding where to go and what to do and what path she wanted to go on. So Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself, talk about like what major you decided on, why you chose the school you did, etc. Give us some background.
Yeah, so I have always been one of those kids who had a million interests and just like could never like I always did pretty well in all of them and then I always I could never decide. So I applied to I think 12 schools. I was thinking of either doing music school. So I looked into um like conservatories. I applied to a number of those, applied to like U Michigan. And the other plan was I was going to be an engineer. So that's what we started with. I actually ended up applying to Princeton as an engineer. Um, and I had a really amazing time while I was applying for schools with physics. And then I just lost interest like by my end of my senior year. I had like I had a teacher I didn't love. And I think I realized that I was really enticed by like this really passionate individual who was teaching me my junior year. And once that was gone, I was no longer super interested in. So I came into Princeton. The really cool thing about Princeton, I decided in Princeton because it was like the only Ivy League I got into, and it's one of those things where like when they call you up, you don't say no. So once I got to Princeton, I kind of felt like I had this like blank canvas. I was like, okay, what are the things that like I always have been really interested in, but I never really felt like it was something that I could do. And like sociology was one of those things on those lists. And I kind of put it together that like, okay, I've always really been interested in talking to really passionate people about their lives, and I've always been interested in like why I like feel social pressure and like why society is the kind of way it is. And I think part of that is I grew up in the Catholic Church and there are all these like really funky rituals and like you learn very like I was like how does this work? Like how did society get this way? Like how did these power structures go into place? Like why am I where I am? Yeah. And so those I went into those questions and I happened to have a sociology 101 class my like freshman fall. Um, and I fell in love with the professor. That's really like the main story of why I ended up where I was. And it's this really fabulous professor, Mitch Junier, and he told us this long-winded story of how he he like he studied sociology in undergrad, and he's always been interested in like the sidewalks and like the kind of informal power structures on the street. And so he was like about to go get his dissertation, um and then his father convinced him to go like be a lawyer, and he's like, okay, like I can do this. So he gets into NYU law school. He's like a very smart guy. um and then he gets in a really bad car accident, is injured for a while, and is like, okay, I think I actually want to do the sociology thing. So he ends up going through with it. And then as I was like, so that was like the first person, that was my first introduction to the sociology department. And then as I was going through, um, and as I was looking at the roster, I was like, wow, all of these people study such incredible things. And just because you're a sociology major doesn't mean you're like stuck in like the sociological theory days. Like you're not just going to be studying kind of a really niche thing. You can use it as a tool to study tons of things like policy. You can study education. You can study like finance. You can study everything with it. And Princeton is a really big, Princeton's major like differentiator is that like they really focus on undergraduate research. So at the end of your time there, you have to do a junior paper and a senior thesis. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to major in, it came down to a couple things. It was what am I going to be able to pack in a lot of time to music and other interests that I want to do. That was my first thing. One of my other things was I definitely want to travel with like whatever I'm going to study with, and what's going to kind of enable me to find research material where I can travel. And that was the answer, is also sociology. And the third one was like, I'm going to be spending a long time on these projects. What is going to what kind of work do I want to be doing that will keep me interested? And it came back to that like initial like thing with like why I was so interested in physics and why I've always been interested in like whatever teacher was the most interesting. It came down to I just love talking to people and I love interviewing people and I love being out in the field. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do sociology. I'm gonna sign up. So that's kind of it's not the most traditional planned out path, but I think it has definitely worked out, and it's had a lot of it's taught me a lot beyond just sociology. Like as a like in sociology degree, you have to like have quantitative background, so they teach you statistics, and that was really helpful for like getting jobs. And then I also had this really great qualitative like background, which is really helpful for like working in business. You could literally work in anything. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in sociology. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for telling us all about it.
Yeah, it was not very, yeah, not your classic, I've wanted to be a doctor forever.
Yeah, I remember like finding out that you were gonna do sociology, and I was like, "What's that?"
Yeah,
I was like, what do you do with that?" But like, yeah, it's definitely, I guess from my perspective, like non-traditional, but like you're right, you can do all kinds of things with it. Um,
yeah, it's a toolkit, if
mhm,
anything. And
mhm.
when I was thinking about it, I mean, I could have also, like, I was studying, and when I came down to like doing research, I studied education policy. So I definitely could have gotten a policy degree as well. Um, but when it came down to it, I think it like made more sense for me to like get a foundation in like a social science where like they have like a really set methodology. And I like could really see through like what it would be like to really do research. And fortunately, like after that, I ended up working at a consulting firm that was like kind of more based on sociology. So what we did was like change management of organizations. So we took organizations that were like running inefficiently in terms of how they managed people and in terms of the culture, and tried to transform the culture so that it was more agile and able to respond quickly. So that was like when I first was like, oh, maybe consulting's a thing that I'd be interested in doing. Um, yeah, and then after doing that, I realized that that was just one piece of the pie of like solving business problems. And then I kind of decided to go to a bigger firm where I am at now, which is Bain and Company, which does some of that. But on the other hand, it's like the buffet of business, which is exactly like where I need to be, because you are learning like case by case. You learn about a different industry, you learn about a different type of problem. Maybe a company is suffering from decline in profitability, or maybe a company is trying to launch a new strategy and they need your support to figure out, is this the market to go into, or is this like a viable solution? So that's kind of where I ended up. I'm a very curious person, so I feel like I'll probably be collecting a number of careers throughout my time. But yeah, I've always kind of been interested on the onset of like how to just maximize as many opportunities as possible. And sociology felt like a way to fit in as much as I wanted in undergrad.
I love that. Yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
always been like my philosophy too, because I've been like very unsure about like what I'm doing. So I try to pick something that's like broad that I can use like in various settings. Mine is a little bit more niche than that, but yeah, definitely
Yeah.
similar strategy.
So what I'm curious is, all right, so if I am like a high school junior and I'm faced with that, like, oh, what major do you want to, focus on? Does sociology require things like any sort of background or prerequisite in certain things? You know how like for example, like Maia and Mikaela do science. So like they would have had all kinds of science and math background, I think. Was there anything like that? Or I guess I'm also curious, like, what are some of the core courses that you take? Like, Is it just like sociology 1, sociology 2?
Yeah.
What all goes into it?
So sociology is like a really broad subset. So like you're studying it's like basically the study of like social life, social change, and like social causes and consequences of human behavior. So it's like very like it could be anything. So what your courses actually tend to be like little subsets. So of course you have sociological theory where you learn about like Marx and Durkheim and some of like the most like the formulaic thinkers of sociology who thought very like broad strokes. And then on top of that, there are all these like little subjects of like, okay, I'm going to study about like urban sociology. So I'm going to learn about how cities function and what are the like what are some of like these sociological phenomenons there. Then there's like the sociology of education, which I actually wasn't able to take because it overlapped with another course, but like that's kind of where my research was. And then there is like I took like an economic sociology course, so it really like touches everything. And I think oftentimes where sociology comes in is like, where are we doing things that are like not super rational, but like it's a thing that everyone's doing. And like I think economists, like many of my friends like are always thinking, okay, like how do we build the model, make it as rational as possible? And I'm like, wait, but like humans don't act that way. Like how do humans actually act? And so I really think you can have a background in many areas. I think it's great to study something you're really passionate about within sociology. So for me, it felt really natural to study education because both of my parents were like teachers, and that was the dinner table conversation. It was like, oh, like how did this policy impact their lives, and how does like policy on paper differ from like what is actually happening when people are actually enacting it. And so I really think if anything, it teaches you a lens to look at anything that you have experience with. So with that degree, I feel like you're going to learn it all once you get there. But I do think really developing strong writing skills is going to help with this kind of stuff. And also like if you can get statistics earlier on, that's really awesome because that is very, very helpful in whatever you tend to go into, especially if you're thinking of doing something in the social sciences, because like quantitative methods are starting to become more and more relevant. And I think, yeah, so I think that's definitely like making sure that you are just like kind of excelling in the like basic core coursework, I would say.
Got it. So there's nothing that you would say like, okay, so if you don't like math, this is not the major for you.
No, I really think it's so broad that like if you don't like math, then you'll go become like an ethnographer. And what what ethnography is just like taking down like you're basically analyzing people and like taking really, really specific notes of like how people are doing things. And like yeah, so it's very like you can definitely do it on the more qualitative end. For me, I already felt like sociology was a little bit of a stretch. So I was like, okay, I really want to make sure I like have my quantitative skills in there so that I can also be able to do like jobs in the future that would also require like kind of more of a statistics background. But yeah, it really, I've met so many different people. A lot of people go to law school after doing sociology. A lot of people become sociologists. Many people get like some people get masters in statistics. Like it's a very like yeah, a lot of people, I think a lot of times people get secondary degrees. It's very common. But then like a number of people go into consulting, finance. It's a broad stroke. It has given me a lot of opportunities. I think also though it is like I was like at sociology at Princeton, which definitely helped because they have a huge like network with like future employers. So I think that's another thing to consider. It's very possible that if I like went to Michigan, I might have been like in the engineering school, or like I think the other thing is like looking at what programs are best at the schools that you're at. So like my sister was at Binghamton and she studied business. This was the best school there. And I mean, she was also interested in business, but I think like that's another thing to consider for sure.
Like taking advantage of like your choice for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes you can be surprised. I actually didn't know that I wanted to do chemistry until I was here or at my school. And then I realized it was like number 15 in the country for chemistry. And I was like, oh, okay. So we got the resources. Like, we're good to go.
Yeah. Because also a lot of times the money at schools follow like what's the best program at that school. So like if you like for example like Michigan has an amazing engineering program and like they have like an amazing like innovation lab and like so I think it's great to think about these things beforehand. So you're like, okay, if I want to be an engineer, I'm gonna apply to the best engineering school. But I think also if you're on the more indecisive end, like take advantage of the programs that are really best at the school once you get there too, especially if you're like at a liberal arts school too, like, and you're like thinking about it that way.
I often went the favorite teacher route through college.
Yeah, I mean,
teachers that I just really liked, so I would take their classes. And I tallied up all my credits, and I said I have the most in this column, so I guess that's my major. I don't advise choosing a major that way, by the way. But that is one way you can do it.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy my studies, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Fair.
You mentioned traveling. Can you talk a little bit about travel that you did like while you were in school?
Yeah, definitely. So in addition to the other things I talked about, I'm also very, very passionate about music. So when I first came to school, I was like, okay, maybe I want to be a festival director. I'm a woman who wears many hats, thinks a lot about it, like has a lot of dreams, has a lot of things I've always wanted to try out. So the first two internships I actually did in college were international arts festivals. So when this was kind of me trying to combine music with practicality. I was like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to be a musician, but maybe I will consider arts administration. So I tried internships in those. And from there, I was working for pretty small nonprofits. One was the Cultural Center of the Philippines, which hosts this beautiful international choir festival, which I'm a choir nerd. So it was like the perfect fit and kind of seemed like one of those opportunities that how could you not like go work at a choir festival when you're like a choir nerd and they're like some of the best singers in the world. And so I think that was my first one. I went to the Philippines for 2 months and that was through Princeton's international internship program. And through that, I learned like a lot of skills about like fundraising and managing sponsorships. And also just like the logistics of coordinating a festival of like over like 400, 500 people. And that was definitely a really interesting part. And then the second year, after my after my sophomore year, I worked at the Bayamba Cultural Foundation for another organization called the Bayamba Cultural Foundation and studied worked on an international arts festival that was much more general. And what was really cool about that is it was such a small organization, like 6 people putting on the festival, that I really got to try everything. So they had like an education, like one person who was working on education. So I got to work on that. I got to work on the marketing for the festival. I even like kind of got to learn some like more about like the finance and like fundraising and finding sponsors. I also got to go on Ugandan radio, which was very interesting as a part of the, like our boss was stuck in traffic. So we had to do that. And that was very cool. I think though, what I was drawn to the most at those festivals was like that, like 4 or 5 days of the festival where you're just like super high alert and you are like troubleshooting left and right. And it's just a very exciting time. There's like this really, really electric energy. And I think that's still something that like long term I could see myself doing. I just think I've realized from those internships that I like wanted to get different skills from an entry level job. So that's kind of why I pivoted more towards business. But I do think eventually it would be very cool to like start a festival or do something like that. Just because music is very near and dear to my heart, and getting people, especially after COVID, internationally together to do this kind of stuff is just, it's very, very cool. And it's a very amazing experience that I've had, and I just want to give to more people. So that's another area that I've been interested in. And then my last thing was when I was visiting Uganda, I happened to visit a school and I noticed that there was like a huge, like there was people from everywhere, like Somalia, South Sudan, Rwanda. And I was very, very drawn to like wanting to understand like how this impacted the school system and how this impacted this particular school, the teachers, the students, the local government that run it. And then that gave me the idea for my senior thesis, which was to go back to Uganda my junior year, after my junior year and actually like study some of that. So that's what so my last and final like major trip with school was going and studying international refugee education in the like central city, Kampala. So that's very cool. And I might actually get to go back next June and do some more research. So we'll see. But yeah, this is why I studied sociology, because I needed something broad.
And it sounds like school had programs that would support all of like your extended interest in all of this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's awesome. And I ended up like having a minor in African studies because I did that international research and I was able to study Swahili my senior year and like take international development, like seminars. So it was like, I feel like everything I could have wanted to study was possible. So I really think that like my kind of understanding of the world just really broadened out throughout college. And I feel like I've gained a much deeper understanding of like how big everything is. Yeah. So that's
amazing.
It was not planned.
I think is so interesting. It's like you were open to opportunities and they showed up and you took advantage of them.
Yeah. I will always say, if you don't know what you're going to do like work as hard as you can on everything that you're doing, you know, like do your best in everything. Cause like, that was the thing for me. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do physics. Like I better like go do really well at this, or like I really wanted to make sure that I really didn't close any doors, especially like at the end of high school. So that it's kind of always been my strategy. I've always like applied to like a million things. And kind of just gone with like the opportunity that scared me the most at the time. And yeah, and that's kind of what's been working. It's been working out so far. The anxious side of me definitely is a little annoyed at the rational pushing side, but it's a give and take.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a million more questions, but I don't want to take over. So you guys.
Oh yeah, Maia, what's your question? Or Mikaela, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah.
I sure do have a question. In your experience at Princeton, what do you think you enjoyed most about the extracurricular opportunities?
That was my question.
But what else?
Yeah, I have not even begun to talk about the extracurricular opportunities, which were like also consumed. Like, I feel like I had 2 jobs in college. It was like extracurriculars and then like my classes. I loved my classes, but I think what really made up my time there was like my time in extracurriculars. And the ones that I were involved with were all music, really. I was the president of the Glee Club during my time there. And the Glee Club is not like the show. It is like this big 80 person choir. And what was very cool about that time is that like we got like the community. We were trying to like 80 people is a really difficult number of people to like get close together. So my good friend and I, Maddie, started a number of like social traditions there. Like we do like glinners where like we would randomly pair people together to like get dinner together. And through that music program, we were able to do such cool things. Like I went to Spain with them my sophomore year, and then I went to Mexico my senior year, like right before COVID started. So that was very cool. And then we got to like perform with Bobby McFerrin and get to like meet all of these like very incredible artists. that was probably like my favorite thing. And then one of the other things that I was really involved with was the Trenton Youth Singers, which is this middle school choir program that I started during my time as the president of Glee Club. It was like the perfect time to start this because there's this amazing Princeton orchestra player, Lou Chen, who is now like the director of Princeton Arts at or I think it's called TAP, so Trenton Arts at Princeton. And he was like just like starting to get all of this funding from the university. So we did like our first year. It was very like we just went to Trenton, had like 3-4 kids every Saturday, had a very ragtag team together, but it was like feeling just the impact of those kids was very, very, very fulfilling. And then like we were really fortunate to be like join the umbrella of Trenton Arts at Princeton my senior year, which meant we had more resources. We instead were able to bring the kids to Princeton instead of having to take Ubers to Trenton every morning, every Saturday morning. And we had I think 15 or 20 kids that last year. So it was very cool to see from N3 to an N of 15, 20. It felt very cool, and it was really that was probably one of my most favorite experiences at Princeton, because they always say Princeton has a lot of funding. Find something you really want to do and propose it, do it. And I kind of slept on that my freshman, sophomore year. I definitely did a lot of international things that already existed, but when I became president, the director of our choir said to me, he was what do you want to do? What do you want to see at this campus? What do you think we're not doing as the music program? And we got started on that, and it was really, really cool to see it happen. And it kind of all goes back to the education and wanting to make music more accessible. And I have a lot of broad strokes, but then many ways I kind of have always gone about it. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the main two. And then I also did a couple other choirs here and there. And Princeton also had operas while I was there too, so I was able to do some of those. But those were classes, which was cool. So I got credit for those. But yeah, those were my main extracurriculars.
That's so beautiful to hear of a big research institution trying to find ways for you as an undergrad student to see your dreams come alive at the school. I love that you're speaking to that. It's cool.
Yeah, it's lucky. I did a lot of stats, and I worked very hard, but I also am really aware of how crazy an opportunity it was.
That's so cool. I guess for our last question, because it's been almost a half an hour.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah. Sorry. I could talk to you all day, Kat, as you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you probably, I'm sure you have other things to do.
Oh my gosh.
But last question, if you had any advice to give yourself during, I guess when you're 17 or 18, about to jump that ship, about to make a choice for college, what advice would you give yourself now?
Ooh, okay. I would say don't freak out because the world's not going to end.
Oh, that's a good one. Are you sure about that? Can I get a guarantee there?
Because I think I was really, really nervous. I remember I got in this big fight with my sister. I wasn't even going to apply to Princeton. I was just no, this is great. That's I was just I didn't have a ton of confidence in how I was doing. So I think part of it would be that. And I also felt a lot of pressure to have it all figured out and try and know exactly what I wanted to study and exactly what I wanted to do, which was really tough for a kid like me that just had a million interests, and literally my interest would change with the wind by the person I talked to. So I would just say keep exploring. Don't worry about just choose one thing, do it do it for as long as it makes you happy, and then just move on to the next thing. It's okay to to try different things and experiment with things that seem different, and you don't have to have some, for me, I think you don't have to have some grand reason to do something besides you're just interested in it. And yeah, I think those would be the ones, because that's kind of the philosophy I went with when I like throughout college, and it worked out.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it is scary and it is overwhelming.
Keep
It is.
exploring, people.
but
What
it
did you
always
say?
works out. Keep exploring.
I love
Yeah.
that. I
I'm
love
gonna,
that.
I'm gonna have to write that on my mirror or something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very
Keep being brave.
Yeah,
Tamp down
be
that anxiety
brave.
side of the brain. Let the
Yeah.
courageous part take over.
Yeah. Yeah. If
I
it
love
scares you, go for it. Because I think basically everything I've done so far has scared the living shit out of me. So. Yeah.
And you know you're doing the right thing. You're outside
Yeah.
your comfort zone. Got it. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. We so appreciate it.
Yeah.
You guys, no more questions, right?
I think I'm good.
All right.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
are so happy that you would join us.
Yeah.
This was
Sorry it's
fun.
not
You
so
had
clear
much good
cut. I'm
information.
like,
What'd you say?
sorry it's not so clear cut. I feel like I'm probably one of the least like.
No, but I think that's the whole thing is like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
everybody it's different. And what I find so interesting as we go visit colleges is like there's all these different choices you can make. And then at the end they go, or you can make your own major. So for somebody like me, that's even more overwhelming. But I
Yeah.
think it encourages us to be creative and kind of think about what do I really want? And
Yeah.
pretty exciting. And
Yeah.
I would love to one of these days get your take on this latest thing about Facebook, speaking of sociology, but for another episode, for sure.
I know.
Pretty wild,
Really,
right?
it is wild. It is
But
wild.
I think it's back up. Thank goodness.
It is back now. That's a whole nother thing that they study, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
True.
All right.
Right,
We'll let you
guys.
go.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you
is great.
so much. Here,
Of course,
I can
of
just
course.